It's freezing cold out here, but in this video I'm going to try my best to explain as simply as possible AES50 connections and how to share inputs and outputs between different consoles and different stage boxes and all of them together. So I'll start with the big concept that I think is really important to understand how the connection actually happens, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of I want these inputs to come from here, these outputs from there. So let's get into it.
First of all, get yourself a shielded Cat5e cable. This is the shield. Okay, it has a shield on the outside. You can use a normal Cat5e cable without a shield that is not shielded. It's fine, nothing's gonna explode, it's not the end of the world. But is it a good idea? No. It's the same as, can you use a unbalanced cable over a long distance? Yes, you can. Is it a good idea? It's not. So get yourself a shielded Cat5e cable or Cat6, both work. Now, do you need this EtherCon type of connector? No. You can just have your normal cable and plug it straight in, but this is kind of for a bit of extra safety. So if you plug it in right here into the AES50A port, this is not going anywhere unless you press on this metal part, right? So if someone accidentally pulls a cable, this is not going anywhere. Whereas the normal connector like this might snap. So this is just for safety. Okay, now I plug this into the A port of the console, AES50A, and on the console, both the A port and the B port have similar capabilities. They can do the same thing. Okay, on the stage boxes, they cannot do the same thing, and we'll get to that. But just remember that on the console, it doesn't matter which one you plugged into, both can do the same thing.
Now grab the other end of that same cable and plug it into the AES50A port on the stage box. And it's really important that it's the A port, not the B port, because on the stage box, the sync happens over the A port.
Okay, now before we continue about syncing and whatnot, what is the AES50? As simply as possible, it's like a highway, a very big highway, where you have 48 lanes of cars going this direction, and on the other side, 48 lanes of cars coming this direction. So it's 48 signals going out and 48 signals coming in at the same time at all times. Okay, so it's a bidirectional connection. It comes and goes both ways. The reason I told you to plug into the A port of the stage box first, not the B port, is the following. Both the mixer and the stage box are sampling an analog signal at a certain sample rate, right? So either at 48,000 times per second or at 44,100 times per second. Cool? Now the console has an internal clock that does this sampling at the exact constant time. However, we are linking two digital devices together. And even if both of them are sampling at the same sample rate, but if they are not in sync, you can't use that signal. It doesn't work. So you have to make sure that the stage box is synced to the console. Okay? So that's why on the stage box, only the A port can do the sync. The B port cannot do the sync. So if I want to connect this one to this one, I will then connect this to the B port of this. Why? Because this already has the synced clock from the console. Cool? Now, right here you have clock source. It's by default on internal. So the master is the console. The console is giving the exact time, and the stage box is following the console. Good? If I want the stage box itself to be the source, to be the master, and make the mixer follow it, I will choose the AES50 port that the console is plugged into. So I'm plugging this stage box into AES50A. So if I choose this one, now you can see right here, it's bad connection. The console gave me a red light. It's telling me the connection is incorrect because right now I didn't configure the stage box yet to be the master. So the console is confused. It's searching for a clock signal to follow. Also, the stage box is lighting up in red because the connection is wrong. So anyway, you will know that the connection is wrong. There's no way that you just don't know if you're connected wrong or right. Okay, so what I'll do is I will hit the config button, keep holding it, and turn this dial until this master button lights up at the same sample rate. Okay, so not 44.1, 48 kilohertz I'm running the console. I'll release this button, and right now we have good connection. The connection is correct. It lights up in green, and on the console also it lights up in green.
Cool. Everything is correct. Now, this stage box is the master and the console is the slave.
Now pay close attention. A bit earlier, I told you that the sync happens over the A port on the stage box, but not on the mixer. On the mixer, A and B can do the same things, right? Because the stage box was the slave, but right now the stage box is the master. So the A port and B port on the stage box can do the same thing. So you can plug into either one and the connection will be correct because now, because it's the master, other devices are syncing to it. It is not syncing to the console is syncing to it. Okay, so if it is the master, you can plug into either the A or B port, it doesn't matter. You cannot have two masters, only one master and the rest are slaves, okay? So if you have the big console running on the internal clock, it is the master. The rest of the devices or the consoles have to be synced to that console, okay? So the small console is connected to the big one. So I have to sync the small console to the AES50 port that it's plugged into. I don't care what the other devices are plugged into. You do the sync over the plug that you are using on the device itself. Something I want to bring your attention to is that you can connect two consoles together without the intermediate of stage box. You don't need to have stage boxes in between. You can connect them directly to each other. So I have this console connected with an Ethernet cable directly to this console. And on this one, I'm plugging it into the AES50B port, okay? So if you look right here, I have a red light. If you look right here, I have a red light. The connection is not correct. So I will go to Setup and go to the Mixer page. And I will sync it to the AES50 port that it is plugged into, okay? Which is the AES50B in this case. So if I click on that and look right here, now the connection is correct. It's lighting green. If I look right here, the connection is correct and it says M32C. This is the correct device that is connected. And I'll go out of this. Okay, you still need to configure the inputs and outputs because this one doesn't have any physical inputs and outputs. So I will go to the routing page. And on the Inputs tab, I will set the inputs to AES50B. And you can see right here on the B port, I'm connected to the M32, the board, which is the correct device also. Okay, I set these and I'll close this. And I have a signal going on input number 16, on the local XLR input number 16 of this console. But if I look right here, although I did the routing, there's nothing. I have no signal. Why is that? It's because I still need to configure the routing on this console. So I'll click Routing and head over to the AES output section. Okay? Because I told this one where to get the inputs from, okay? But I'm not sending anything from here yet, or I am sending by default, but not what I want to send. Okay, so on this console, I'm using the A port. So I will go to AES50A in the routing menu. And I want 1 to 8, the outputs 1 to 8 of AES50 to be the local XLR inputs. Okay, so local 1 to 8. Now what is going out of the AES50 port from this console are the first 8 XLR inputs that are on this console. Do the same for the others, 9 to 16, local 9 to 16, 17 to 24, local 17 to 24, and 25 to 32, local 25 to 32. Now, this console is still getting its inputs from the local inputs. It's still getting them. But also this one is getting the inputs from the XLR inputs on the back of this console. And that's the really cool thing I want to bring your attention to, is that you don't need stage boxes. You can share inputs and outputs directly between consoles. And the same goes for the outputs. So let's configure the outputs of the M32C that doesn't have any physical XLR outputs to go out from the physical XLR outputs of the M32 Live. I want the outputs of this console to come out of the physical XLR outputs of this console because this one doesn't have any physical outputs or inputs. So I'll go to the routing menu
and I'll go to the AES50 tab. And right here, since I'm connected to the AES50B port, I will look at the AES50B outputs, and they are assigned to out 1 to 8, out 9 to 16. That's how it's assigned by default. I don't need to change anything. So the AES50 outputs for this case are assigned correctly. Okay, I'll generate pink noise. I'll open the monitor menu and go to oscillator tab, and I'll generate pink noise. Turn on the tone button, and it's on pink. And I'll raise the level a little bit just so I can see a signal. And this is on bus number 1. So I'll go ahead and raise the fader of bus number 1 so that signal is coming out of it. Cool. Now this, by default, should come out of the first XLR outputs. But since this doesn't have any XLR output, I'll go right here, and we connected the AES50 properly. I go right here to the routing menu and swipe over to the XLR tab. Okay, this is what comes out of the physical XLR outputs on this console. So by default, it's out 1 to 4, out 5 to 16, which are these outputs assigned to the buses and to the main left and right. So I'll assign XLR 1 to 4 to AES50A 1 to 4 because this console is connected to the AES50A. And you can see right here, I have signal on channel number 16 because I have the output number 1 connected to XLR input number 16. But I'm not generating any pink noise on this console. There's nothing going on right here. See? The signal that is generated is coming from this console right here and going out of the XLR output number 1 of this console and getting into the channel.
Okay, but who actually controls the physical preamp gain? Not the digital trim on the channel, but the actual gain of the preamp. That's really important, so let's talk about that.
Let's go to Setup, click on the Setup button, and swipe over to the Preamp section. This is where you actually control the preamps. By default, you can use the gain knob on the console, and it will control the preamp of each channel. Okay, but this is where you actually have control over what goes on with the preamps. So if you look right here, I'm controlling the local preamps. I can control the AES50A preamps. I can control the AES50B preamps. Okay, this is where I choose what preamps I want to control. But let's look right here. You have global options. You can lock the stage box. So if I do that, do you want to disable preamp controls on all controlled stage boxes? So if I confirm, right now, if I want to change the gain, if I click gain, and I want to change it on the stage box, I cannot do that anymore if it's connected to the console. Okay, so no one on stage can actually change the gain. You can only do that from the console. I'll turn it off again for now. Head-amp gain split is that it only allows the channel to have, if I will turn it on, it only allows the channel to have a trim. So this is the trim, right? So if I lower or raise that, it will lower and raise the signal that's coming into the channel, but it's not actually changing the preamp. Okay, so it's a digital trim only. So if you have this on, you can make sure that the preamp gain will remain unchanged even if someone actually changes the input gain of the channel itself. Cool? Now, head amp remote, HA is head amp. I can have the preamps of this console be controlled not by this console, but by the device that is connected to the AES50A port or B port. So if I do this right now, the preamp of this console is being controlled by the AES50A port. I will go to the other console, and I'm gonna open the setup and go to the preamps tab. And it doesn't have any local preamps, so I'm gonna go to the connected port I have on AES50B. So I'm gonna go to AES50B 1 to 8, 9 to 16, and you can see I have this console connected to it. So right now, if I raise the preamp gain of channel number 16, which I have signal on, it will clip. Can you see?
I'm raising the actual preamp gain of this console
From here.
Pretty cool stuff, right? Pretty cool stuff. Now, if you already know how to configure your stage boxes, you can stop watching right now. I think I talked about all the important stuff I wanted to talk about. And if you have a DL32 stage box, there's nothing to configure on it. It's just one button that mutes all preamps. There's nothing to actually do with it. Okay, but if you have a DL16 stage box and you're not really sure what things mean and what things do, that's what I'm gonna talk about right now. The first stage box at the top is connected to the console through the A port, because remember, it syncs over the A port because this is a slave to the console. And then from the B port, I connect it to the A port of the second stage box. Okay, so I'm cascading them. And I can cascade up to 3 stage boxes. Why 3 boxes of these 16 input boxes? Because the AES50 is 48 channels of bidirectional signal, right? So you can have up to 48 inputs active all at once, although the console can technically only handle 32 inputs, but you can have 48 active. However, you can actually have more than 32. You can have like 38 because you have 6 aux inputs, right? And the aux inputs, you can assign them to AES50 1 to 6 or to user in 1 to 6 and then configure it in the user in section. So yes, you can have more than 32 inputs at once. And also the outputs, you can have more than 16 outputs. You can assign the rest of the, if you have 3 boxes, you have 24 outputs. So you can assign 17 to 24 to the P16 outputs and send whatever you want on those. This rotary knob is for selecting the preamp on the stage box. So this is the number of the preamp. And I have the console connected to the first box and the first box connected to the second box, right? So from console to A port, then out of B port to A port on the second one. Okay, now you select each preamp and you hold the gain button, and now you can change the gain. It's really difficult to do it with one hand. And release, and now you're out of it. Select another preamp, change the gain, and release. Cool. And the preamp you selected, you can turn on phantom power, and it will light up. The light right here, turn off phantom power, and the configuration section. This is quite confusing, I'm not gonna lie. Some of it I had to look up in the manual because it's not really obvious what's going on. So let's start from the beginning. I'll hold the configuration button and it says 1 to 8. 1 to 8 means that these 8 outputs are AES50 outputs 1 to 8. Okay, so whatever is on the AES50 1 to 8 comes out of these physical XLR outputs. Now on the other box, because this is cascaded from this one, I don't want also these to be 1 to 8. I want them to be 9 to 16, right? Because I'm using 2 boxes in conjunction and I have 16 outputs on the console. So I'm gonna click configuration and I'm gonna turn it to 9 to 16. So right now the first box is giving me outputs 1 to 8. The second box is giving me outputs 9 to 16. Cool, let's continue. I'll hold the config button, swipe over. I can also set it to 17 to 24 because whatever is on the, as I told you before, if I have 3 stage boxes, I can have these extra outputs. I can get out the P16 outputs, for example. So that's that. Let's continue. Okay, now it's a splitter. That does not mean the gain split that I showed you on the console a bit earlier. It's not the gain split, okay? That has nothing to do with it. These actually have to do with the settings of the P16 plugs on the back of the stage box and the ADAT outputs. So these right here, if you can see it, the alternate and the ADAT outputs. I will put a screenshot on the screen from the manual, or you can read the manual yourself and see these configurations, how they work. But basically, when you change these, you're still doing 1 to 8 or 9 to 16 on the outputs, but it's changing the configuration of where it's getting from the P16 and the ADAT. Okay, so if it's getting them from here or from the local XLR inputs on the console, and you can
switch over to make it a master. If it's the master, then you set the sample rate from here. It doesn't take it anymore from the console or the clock. So it's doing the clock and the sample rate, and the others have to follow it. Cool. And you decide from here. And this L means local, again, for the ADAT and P16. It has nothing to do with these. So what you will do in most cases is just either 1 to 8 for the first box or 9 to 16 for the second box, and not worry about anything else. And of course, it's not enough to plug the stage boxes to the console. You have to also assign the inputs. So I'm going to go to the routing page, and on inputs, I'm going to say that input 1 to 8 is going to come from AES50, A1 to 8, because I'm plugging into the A port, so I use the AES50A, and AES59 to 16, AES50A 17 to 24, AES58 25 to 32. And if you have a third box plugged in, you can also assign the aux ins to AES50, which is cool. But I'll just leave it on aux in. And let's check the outputs of AES50A, because I'm using AES50A port on this console. It's assigned to output 1 to 8, output 9 to 16, and so on. This is correct. So whatever the outputs here are assigned to will come out of this stage box.
That's it. That's all I have to say about the AES50 connections and sharing inputs and outputs between consoles and stage boxes and all of them together. And I really hope this made you understand AES50 a bit better and how it works. And you'll be able now to mix and match between things and get inputs and outputs from here and from there. If you liked the video, hit the like button. I would appreciate that very much. Thank you. And click right here to learn how to mix from scratch, from nothing, zero to full mix. I also give you practice scenes for every step of the way. See how good I am with you? Just click here and I'll see you in the next video.